Thanks for joining me, everyone. This is Shemin Vizzi with AFF-CNY's pre-conference interview series. The next workshop presenter I chatted with is going to do a workshop on foster care, adoption, and the educational system and bridging the gap. Let's take a look at what we had a chat about. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Today, I'm actually interviewing co-presenters. Why don't you take it each, oh, I can't even say it right. Take your time and introduce who you are and how you're connected to adoption and the foster care community for everyone to hear.
Sure. I'll start. I had, I had been a New York State certified teacher and school administrator for several years, and had actually left the school community because when I was principal, some of the children were at the time being taken out of classrooms by social services to be interviewed and things like that. And I always just worried for the kids. So I decided to leave the schools and become a social worker. And so it was a big jump, but it was something I felt the calling for. So I joined a therapeutic foster care agency as a caseworker for 4 years, and then became the program manager for another 7. During my time with them, I started to realize that because foster care, children in care, and then those that are, having their permanency ended and things like that, were being slighted by the school systems. They were, because they were transitional, and to me, they weren't given the rights that every other child should have been given in the schools. So I decided to go to every single CSE meeting that I went to for each of the children in my care or my workers' care, to make sure that they were getting the proper services, that they were being, tested correctly, and they weren't getting lost in the system. And because I had the school administration and teaching background, I kind of threw the CSE chairs and them a little bit like, wow, I'm going to fight for the kids. So that led me into the foster care system myself. Representing families, foster families, adoptive families, and things like that in the to make sure the kids were getting the services they needed while they were in their schools.
Okay. And Jake, and by the way, that's Kim Diaz, is correct?
Yeah, I was just going to say, by the way, that's Kim Diaz. And yes,
and Jake, Jake's turn.
Jake Stomieroski. I've been in education for 30 some odd years. Most of it special education, and I've just always advocated for special ed needs, children with special needs that just need some help to get through the system. And a lot of times I found especially in the foster care adoption area, county offices, people don't really understand the process, and sometimes children are left out. They don't get what they need to be successful. The last 15 years of my career, I was principal of a career tech ed center, BOCES. And part of my job was making sure those special ed students in high school had the chance to take one of our career courses so they had possible future. And so I have always advocated for all children with special needs, but especially the foster care, things like that.
Right. I see here, Kim, you're a founder of Educational Solutions. What exactly is that, and why did you decide that that was important to start?
Educational Solutions is actually a company, our company. And what we started to do was, it had to do with my representation of the foster population, foster adoptive population, and helping families to guide them. So what we would do is we would offer those same services to anyone. And then we started realizing that we had, with both of our backgrounds, I'm an early childhood specialist through middle school, and he's middle school through high school. I mean, pretty much K through high school for him with special needs. So what we did was we started to do presentations to local departments of just social services. We do trauma, vicarious trauma, We call it Making the Grade, with what we're going to be presenting to on May 6th, where we talk about the special needs population and how, we get from the IFSP for, the young children up to IEP developments. So Educational Solution, we started to presenting to the local departments of DSS to give them a little bit of an up, to see to help them with what they're going through. So we've done quite a few counties in New York State on what I've discussed. I've done some parenting courses as well for those parents that, have to satisfy to get their children back or things like that for permanency. So Educational Solutions is an all-around presenter. We also did a keynote presentation for Northern Rivers a couple of years back for their foster parent conference. So we're very involved in that community.
Awesome. So Jake, since you're more towards the what I would say the transition into adulthood life after they turn 18 or 21, depending upon their developmental spot in life, what kind of things New York State has got a little bit of a gap there. I'm trying to be very kind on my Many families start off trying to learn through this system, and they're never told anything. It's not forthcoming. What kind of things have you dealt with, even just globally, with transitioning people, adults, into the workforce and trying to get them help? Have you had any examples of struggles that you have found?
Many, because the system changes so rapidly. Just graduation requirements to get a kid to that point where they can graduate with a diploma and have a possibility of a job. That's one of the things we'll discuss in the workshop, is the different ways to get that, because people don't realize you don't have to do A, B, and C anymore. You can do X, Y, Z and still graduate with a real diploma. But yes, helping students not only finish their education, have some experience in some career field, but also teaching them that 21st century skills. The business owners are looking for students that show up to work, that aren't on their phone. Just the common sense things that people our age realize, but sometimes students don't. And I mean, so we're not only teaching them careers, but we're teaching them to be good citizens. The success stories that we've had through my BOCES and others throughout the state that I've heard. The career field is just a great way to transition those students into something positive.
Yeah, I feel like with New York State, because obviously that's where I am, so I know mostly about that. Mm-hmm. It's got the programs out there. They're not always great. They're not always, but like, for instance, the BOCES, they're far away from everybody. There's not to trek somebody out there. So a lot of people don't even take that option because it takes a couple hours to get there. Or the really good one is upstate, and I'm on Long Island. So it's integrating it also into the school system. I mean, we used to call it home ec, whatever, but
right.
The life skills program,
yeah,
they write them off at a certain point. And the life skills program, they don't integrate them as much or at all. And it's very disheartening to know by the time a kid is like 13 years old, even in just a general population, never mind if they're going through struggles at home,
right,
through foster care, adoption. I digress.
it's a good topic to talk about, though.
it is. And what was it that drove you to see that the foster care community was the one that needed the most help? You basically already said it, but what was it that kind of went, all right, I need to make this, I'll call it a turn in my field to really kind of focus on that? Was there something that like a situation that happened, or it was a whole culmination of so many just happened all at once, if that makes sense?
Yes, it does. Actually, it's kind of an interesting story.
Okay.
Kim and I worked together professionally as teachers before she got into foster care. And it just happened the same time she left the school that we taught at, that I left that school also and went to a BOCES. And every year it just happened that I had some of her clients in my class. And
nowhere near each other either.
Just a real strange coincidence. And even when I changed BOCES, I still had students of hers in my classes. I mean, so I was able to see from her eyes how the foster care students weren't really
taken care of.
Yeah. I mean, so I got into it that way. Then even more so when I got further into BOCES.
I feel like there's a lot of people where I am are trying to do a lot of trauma informed CSEs. They try to add that on there. IEPs for the kids, especially if there's a young child, older child, where there are placements, there's a bunch of placements, and there's a lot of pushback on the word trauma. And I don't know how you feel about it, but it's very, I'm in it a little bit. I don't do it for a living that way, but I am in it myself and trying to get that. And again, the parents don't know what kind of rules they're allowed to follow. They don't know a lot about CSEs, because even though there's a handbook, there's nothing in there about how to do it.
No, it can be, I think the way we look at it, and I used to always say this at the CSE meetings, was because I was a school administrator and I was a teacher for so many years, that the schools tend to feel that they're elitist. And they tend to look, and I'm saying a very general statement, but they tend to not understand. I mean, I've sat at many CSE meetings where it's like, the kid's going to be in and out, whatever, we'll get him whatever we can, and who cares? And the injustice bothered me so greatly, that these are children who are already, speaking of being traumatized, and school, they've lost their family, and then they lost their school family too. And now they're thrown into a school system who doesn't really welcome them, or actually ostracizes them, and God knows that I've seen it even where the teachers will trigger these kids. And so for me, going in and being their voice every single time, let the CSE chairs know, I know where you're coming from, and I don't like it. And I got New York State Board of Ed on speed dial. So you either work with me for these children, or you can work with the state ed department. So we were really their voice.
One of the things we talk about throughout our workshop is a difference between the IEP and the 504. Parents sometimes think that if their child gets an IEP, they're stigmatized. And that's true to some point, but there's other ways to get students services and help. I mean, how many kids these days have anxiety?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, especially
I have anxiety.
Right. Exactly.
But especially students in foster care.
Yeah.
And you can get kids services through the 504 that doesn't stigmatize them and still helps them through the graduation process.
Right.
So we touched on all that.
Yeah, no. So I was going to say, so we'll end on, why do you, whoever wants to take this one, why do you feel this is important for the community to hear what you have to say at the workshop? Whoever wants to take that one.
These are our children. And with all the things we see on the news today, this is our way to try to help and bridge that gap. that we think, because the schools and foster care and families all work with the same population, our children. And they spend a lot of time in school that forms their personality and gives them what they need. And in so many cases, what the families are not able to give these days. So there has to be a joint effort to understand both populations. We already understand pretty much the family piece, but the families need to understand the school piece. And we have to bridge that gap. And so this is our way of giving them the information that they need to help fill that gap.